Great. Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Nikunj Trivedi. I'm the president of CoHNA, Coalition of Hindus of North America. We are a grassroots advocacy and civil rights organization advocating for a better understanding of Hinduism and representing the community of North America on matters related to our issues that are happening in the United States and Canada. I want to welcome everyone today. This is also the 5th year anniversary of CoHNA. So we were born 5 years ago, and we'll be celebrating the 5-year anniversary for the next several months. And we invite you to join our programs, various types of galas, webinars, events that are going to be focusing on what the impact CoHNA has made over the past 5 years. And today's topic is front and center of that, which is caste. 5 years ago when CoHNA was started, one of the biggest issues that happened in the United States was the Cisco lawsuit, where 2 Indian American engineers were accused of systemic caste discrimination. And several years later, after they were maligned and dragged through the mud, their names were cleared by the California courts, and they were essentially dragged and had to spend so much time, energy, and millions of dollars defending themselves. And this is a very important point to be made when people of our community think about the narratives that impact us and how they can be used to target us and profile us. California almost passed a caste discrimination bill into law. Had it not been vetoed with the governor and through the opposition of various Hindu and non-Hindu groups, the community would have been in big trouble, and that would have percolated across the United States. Similar efforts are being made in Canada. So, all the time, the community has been in responsive mode. And we are really happy to see, of course, the response and the pushback. But at the same time, it's important for us to build our own narratives. And with that, we have a bunch of new things that have come out. People have come out with, articles, various types of op-eds. But now we are starting to see documentaries coming out that are focusing on showing a different narrative. And so the Caste Rush, which is set to premiere next week, and Nikhil Singh Rajputji, who is joining us today, he's going to talk more about that. But it's set to premiere next week, is challenging such a narrative and creating opportunities for a dialogue to show that in Hindu society, for example, is indeed complex and cannot be painted with one broad brush. And Hinduism cannot be dismantled no matter what we say or no matter what other people say. It is our responsibility as Hindus, as citizens of this country, as well as the world, to ensure that Hinduism has its rightful place in this world, that social problems exist in every society should not be used to dismantle an entire religion or call for the dismantling of entire religion. So with that, I want to welcome Nikhil Singh Rajputji. He has a very interesting biography, which I am going to read from IMDb. So Nikhil Singh Rajput was born in Chhapra, Bihar, and completed his high school in Varanasi and his secondary school in Ranchi. When he prepared for engineering in Kota, Rajasthan, graduated from Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi with a B.Tech in textile technology. He was an assistant director in Mumbai film industry and later attended a summer program at the University of Southern California Film School down in Southern California. There you go. In 2009, his debut film was an indie Bollywood feature, With Love, Delhi, in 2011, which was released across theaters in India and starred Tom Alter, Seema Biswas, and Kiran Kumar. He's also known for his award-winning documentaries. Himalayan Refugee 2017 feature Tariq Fateh was based on the plight of Kashmiri Ahmadi communities seeking asylum in Nepal. The film was screened at Docuta International Documentary Film Festival, Tasveer South Asian Film Festival, Chicago South Asian Film Festival, 11th Dada Saheb Phalke Film Festival, Film South Asia, etc. Blood Buddhas of 2019 is a documentary film on the reparation of ancient Indian antiques from across the world and is shot in India, Singapore, the UK, and the US. The film features Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Subramaniam Swamy, Deborah Lair, Dominic Di Giovanni, Christopher Marinello, Anurag Saxena, and C.S. Rangarajan, head priests of Chilkur Balaji Temple. The film has been a runners-up at Chicago Chicago South Asian Film Festival, an official selection at Rochester Indian Film Festival, and has been a crowd puller at the Earth Cultural Festival, Khajuraho Literary Festival, and Mangalore Literature Festival. So he has a very polished resume and background. And so we are so happy that he has been joining us. CoHNA is proud to support such endeavors. that's try to set the narrative right and showcase various different types of perspectives to challenge the current misconceptions and the Hindu-phobic narratives that call for dismantling of Hinduism. So with that, I want to welcome Nikhilji. Let's get right into it. Nikhilji, I got a chance to see this, a preview of this, and so thank you very much for sharing that with me. And I was really excited to to see that people have actually, across all of India, you have taken a journey. And first of all, I enjoyed that journey, just to be very clear. I enjoyed the spiritual journey that you have taken the viewers in from north to south, from east to west, to showcase the kaleidoscope of our culture through Sanatana Dharma in this film. So, but let me start. I want to get your perspective. Why did you start this film? Like, I have my perspective, but I want to hear from you, a film director, filmmaker. Why did you decide to do this film first?
So prior to this, I'd worked with Indic Dialogue. And so me and folks at Indic Dialogue are friendly. And when the raid on Bab's Temple happened, that's when I got hooked into what I just knew something was not right. Because as a Sanatani who lives in India, we know that temple constructions and all of those things, and especially the BAPS organization, they are worth their weight in gold. And so they are not going to undercut a laborer or an artisan that way. So I knew something was wrong. And that's when we started talking about, that's when I got into the whole anti-caste narrative leading to anti-Sanatan narrative in the United States. And people had some very colorful things to say about my alma mater, which is IIT, which for a person who's been there for good 4 years of his life and spent another 2 preparing for it, is an incredible place. And so that's when I got sucked into the whole thing. And I said, this obviously is wrong. But then how do you say that to somebody who's barely ever been to India, has no desire or might not even visit India? Least of all about whatever you heard, whatever you hear in those kind of podcasts or narratives, you as a person, as a Sanatani living in India, know it is rubbish. Like, to give you an example, there was an article, like a proper paper in a reputed magazine, which said, they ask you to take off your shirt so they can see your janeo so you can get inside the temple. Now, anybody living in India, Hindu or not, knows that we are so crowded, we are so full, and so few people wear that sacred thread. I don't wear one, never been stopped, never stopped anywhere. That it would be impossible to even enforce this, even if somebody wanted to do this. This is common sense for everybody. And yet, this BS, I'm using a US term, so bear with me on this. This BS found itself in a reputed scientific journal. Can you believe it? So I thought somebody has to do something about it. And I used this opportunity to visit all these temples and then talk to the head priest. So there was something in it for me too.
No, great. And, you bring up this point about this, just the Janoi and things like that. And what's really interesting is if you read, some of the genesis of this goes back even before the Cisco lawsuit, and of course the Swaminarayan Temple attack, which, by the way, in 2021, and nothing has been proven so far. If some of the workers actually retracted their statements, and they actually said that some of the people, including one of the lawyers, coerced them to make these statements, right? So some of the workers actually said, no, we have not been discriminated at the Swaminarayan Temple. This has been forced upon us. So there's so many layers. So in this sort of rush for social justice, during the post-George Floyd era, people just jumped the gun and decided to descend upon a temple like it was a terrorist site, right? And, sort of like violating the sacredness of the space and fundamental rights of Hindus, etc. And to be found, nothing has been found so far, right? In that sense. I'm talking about caste discrimination. So I'm very specifically focusing on caste discrimination. Now, the second point that I want to talk about is this idea that you mentioned. I think that is if you go back, let's say 200 years, right? You will find that kind of colonial racist narrative that has dominated the discourse in universities, in journals, in, just like that. And that continues to now dominate the mainstream media, where Indians or Hindus are shown as, cow dung eaters, cow piss drinkers, like these like really crazy castists, like who are going to destroy like a social fabric, etc. So this kind of like and that's why we call it Hinduphobia, because it's showing this monster that is, or creating this monster where it doesn't exist, right? So this idea that there's this religion that is, wholesale discriminating against people is where you see this narrative. So this sacred thread thing, to come back to my point, has also been used in surveys. So the Equality Lab survey, and then in this lawsuit, if you look at it, one of the things that they say is like, oh, one colleague put their hand on the shoulder of another colleague to see if it was wearing the sacred thread. Right? I mean, can that happen? Somebody may do that, right? Maybe. But is this the depiction of like the entire, 4 or 5 million Hindus or Indian Americans that are living in America, that this is how? So this is and so I'm glad you brought that up. And so I want to come back to the movie itself, right? So let's talk about a few things in the movie. Number one.
Can I
Yeah, please. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah, this is some very, very creative fictional writing, and they should probably apply for those Indian TV soaps, and they're short on writers. This is an excellent, pulling something out of thin air. Yeah, this hand thing, lived my entire life in India. Nobody did it to me. I never saw anybody do it to me. But in a fiction of some imagination, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and this is how things start
up. Fit for Indian TV television soaps. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're right. And so what happens is when you start to cry Hindutva or cry Hinduphobia, right? This is like essentially what you say is, hey, this is how this is. And if you keep repeating it with like tears in your eyes and sob stories, people start to think, no, maybe this is true. Nobody fact checks, right? So the fact that the guy who so-called discriminated was actually an atheist, right? Sundar Iyer is a registered atheist, meaning sense that he has actually said that he's an atheist, and he has said, hey, I don't believe in the caste system or any of that stuff. He's the one who was attacked, and he was given what they call upon information and belief. According to Cisco, the lawsuit case, they're saying upon information and belief, we think Sundar Iyer is a Brahmin, right? When he's an atheist. So this is the kind of narrative that we see. So in the documentary that you have, you showcase different types of temples. And one of the temples that you had shown was a temple where, the Dalit, there's a Dalit priest, the so-called, and I don't like to use these identities. So unfortunately, because of where we are, I have to use these. So there's a quote unquote Dalit priest, and you interview them and you ask them that nobody says that, you are a Dalit priest. It's a Mataji temple, in Ghanteshwari Ma, I believe. So in there, he says,
century.
Exactly.
17th century.
So at least for 300 years, his family has been given the Uttardaitu, or the responsibility by the king to do so tell me more about that a little bit.
So what is happening is, before India became an independent country, most of these temples were, what's the correct English word? The kings gave them to bhakts or to the local zamindars or whoever, and then they selected whoever was willing to be the pujari there. And so that selection was always merit based, because this is not a birth based selection. So if the king was impressed with how well you were taking care of the deity in the temple, he was somehow passing by and saw that, oh my God, this is such a beautiful temple, kept XYZ. He or she just gave it to you and said that, okay, I'll give you. So it is not unusual for kings to give it to people. And in this particular case, by the way, this is just one off camera, because this is a documentary film. It's not a PhD thesis.
Yeah.
People in Odisha, which is as conservative as it gets, they tell me that 80% of all Bhairav temples, which is Lord Shiva temple, and 80-90% of Devi temples all of them will have non-Brahmin priests. And the ratio is a little lower in Vaishnav temples, because then Vaishnav temples are more strict. But even there, the priest, like the head priest is somebody, and then his followers, and then there are 10 other priests, and then they are priests. So nobody asks their caste of birth, right? So they are a priest. So the priest who comes to my house, for example, I have never bothered to ask his caste, because that's not the point. But that's a lived reality of Sanatanis living in India, right?
Yeah.
So same thing in Rajasthan. The person who was my interlocutor there said, I have a list of 200 temples, 200, 200. And he says, these are the temples where the priest is not Brahmin. I said, please include it after the credit and all of that. I said, bro, we are not, we are not doing a PhD thesis. So that's how. So safe to say, a conservative estimate would be 50 to 70% of all Hindu mandirs will have a priest or a few priests who would not be born Brahmin. So there you go. So much for Brahmin being the priestly class.
Yeah. And in fact, there's another temple that you bring up in the southern part of India where you have two types of priests doing the exact same time. One is a Brahmin and another one is a Brahmin. And what's interesting to me in that one is it's not like the Brahmin goes first and then the non-Brahmin goes first, or or he goes in, as the guy says, one of the columnist says, it's not that the Brahmin goes in the morning and the non-Brahmin goes in the evening or afternoon. No, they do it at the same time. One guy says something, another guy says something. So it's like part of the same sort of like ritual, part of the same process. So that was very interesting. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was an eye-opener because I have not seen this. So for those of you who are aware, there's a Kashi Vishwanath temple, which is as old as it gets. And there, so what happens is generally in these temples, there are also artis done or some kind of a puja done by the people who live around it. So back in the day, if you go to Vishwanath temple, this happens. The 10:30 p.m. Aarti, the last Aarti, is done by the locals. And every day, without fail, they will attend it, they will sing it. The priest has got nothing to do with it, right? This is a bhakt ritual. And so I have attended it as non-local, but I've been there. But this particular temple, it's so beautiful because the deity is also the deity of the trading class. So the bhakts from the trading class, which would be called Vash in the lingua franca of the caste rushers, because she is their deity primarily, so they have the first adhikar, so they have the first right to the deity, and so then they are reciting the mantras, and then the Brahmins are reciting the mantra, and together they worship the deity. Yeah. So bhakti and the, what do you say, the scholarly, they do it together. So bhakti is such a huge part of our culture, of our dharma, that supersedes any kind of barrier that you might have. Hence, the last slide in the film is Sri Krishna himself saying in Gita that if you come to me from the bhakti path, doesn't matter what is the condition of your birth or your family background or whatever you've done. So that this particular temple it was so beautiful. I was there. They didn't let me film it. It was so beautiful. It was so mesmerizing. I wish I could record it. They said no, but it was wonderful. So you find, so just to make a point, in India, the temples do not follow, unlike a Christian church or a masjid. There's no one prescribed way of worshiping. So the deities are different. The way they are worshipped is different. The day they are worshipped in different months is different. The way they are worshipped from morning is different to the way they are worshipped in evening, right? So hence what you said, you cannot, paint it in a broad
brush,
stroke.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I wish we could do that, but even we can't do it. It's too diverse. No,
and one of the challenges that the British had. So CoHNA has done a lot of work. So if those who want to learn more about, sort of different narratives on caste, go to cohna.org/decolonize, cohna.org/decolonize. And when your documentary is there, we'll feature it there too. In there, we have talked about many of these things. So one of the issues that the British ran into, because they sort of created this idea of caste the way we know today from a colonial perspective. So one of the challenges that they had, as you said, is they tried to figure out, is there a Bible in the Hindus? Is there a church in the Hindus? And they couldn't, not only is there no Bible, there is no one particular, style of teaching. There's, if you think Shankaracharya is like the supreme pontiff of the whole thing, no, that's not true, because there are sections in society who don't care about Shankaracharya from that perspective. They may respect, but they have their own gurus. Then if you have, Gita, or only one section, maybe someone else is thinking Mahabharata, someone is Vedas. So they were very perplexed by this diversity, this vast, huge diversity. But in the Hindu tradition, people are just comfortable with that, because they're saying, hey, you do what you do. I'm going to do what I do. I have my way of doing things. You have your way of doing. I have my guru. You have your guru. And we are all okay with that. And that's like, when you were showing that, I saw that. And I want to, so there is one, for example, that there is a, the Jagannath Yatra. There are two things that that came out of that. Apparently, and I'm obviously, I don't know all about the details, but one of the things that was in the movie is 119 types of services are done at the Jagannath Temple. And all the 119 types of services are assigned to different types of people. And they have been doing this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, the same thing. And everyone gets a chance to do the service for Bhagavan and in their own ways. And so that 119. Then there's the food items. So there's this whole idea of untouchability and food, right? So I don't take food from Dalit, I don't take food from this. That's what, the narrative is, right? But what the Acharya says is that there are food items. So let's say somebody had food and then there's leftover food in that same patra, like in the same one. People just pick it up as prasad, even leftover food. And nobody asks saying, oh my God, did that Dalit eat that food? Then I'm not going to eat that prasad. Nobody even looks at that. The second point, which was really interesting to me, was during COVID. Okay. So during COVID, the Jagannath Yatra was closed. Okay.
Yeah.
Someone filed a petition to the court to open it, saying that why once a year we get the glory of Jagannath outside of the temple. Why are you stopping that? And the court opened it. And as of course but the viewers don't know who the person filed. The person who filed the petition to open the Rath Yatra so that devotees can get a glimpse of Bhagavan was a Muslim guy. Okay.
So if you go to Puri,
a Jagannath Puri.
If you go to Puri, you would be surprised how the entire city, irrespective of religion, forget about caste, irrespective of religion, everybody is in awe and reverent to Jagannath Bhagwan. So this particular case, although I didn't know it was a Muslim devotee, but the rule is that for people of non-Hindu faith cannot enter the temple.
Yes.
And specifically for them, Jagannath Yatra is out. So if you can't visit the Almighty Divine, the Divine visits you.
Yes. And Bhagavan comes to you. Yes.
And so at the Jagannath Yatra, it would be impossible to find your feet on the ground, because the entire city, irrespective of their religion, is like, this is our day.
Yes.
Right? So the Muslim devotee he does not see any distinction there, because he's like, for one day, Lord Jagannath is out and I'm going to celebrate it. And then he goes to Supreme Court. I don't know who he is, but he just went there. And because he was a Muslim, probably the Supreme Court made an exception. Had it been a Hindu, maybe the Supreme Court.
Maybe not, exactly. So, so-called secularism, unfortunately, in India.
Yeah.
So but I thought the reason I brought that up is because I thought it was fascinating, because people in the West have a very, very skewed view of things in India when it comes to interreligious harmony or interreligious conflicts, whatever you want to say. And so like the fact that this actually happens is really interesting to me. That's one thing. Then there was a talk about Mirabai's temple, right? So the Mirabai,
Yeah.
the one where Mirabai actually did the puja, the bhakti of Krishna, right? Girdhari. There, the mandir, who the I guess the people who open it and who has the first right of the prasad and things like that are from the so-called low caste community, so-called Dalit community. I'm forgetting the exact name of that community that they bring. It was like something Jingar or something. I forgot the name of it. But in there, they very specifically say, we as so-called Dalits have the first right to this temple, the prasad. And it was the Chamar from the Chamar community also. And we have no issues. We are seeing this, and then people, and there's a shot that you have where you have like people who are from all different communities. Like I'm from a Brahmin community, I'm from the Rajput community, I'm from the so-called this Chamar community, this community, etc. And we're all here together. Everyone is here together. No one's facing any kind of like, oh, you cannot come in. Oh, are you a Dalit? You have to stay in the back, or you cannot eat this food, etc. So I thought that was also quite fascinating. And then the second one was Ramdev Pirs, Ramdev's Mandir. In there, also same thing. He's from the Chamar community, and there's a whole group of people who say, hey, he was from our community, and now look, everybody's coming to this mandir. So I thought that was also very fascinating because you kind of went through all the way from like the north to the south to the east, the west, like different places to show this kind of diversity. And so I thought that was a very interesting sort of narrative, if you want to say, to build. But now I want to go ahead, please. Yeah.
One of the problems we face as documentary filmmakers, especially if you're trying to go against the narrative set by well-funded organizations with an agenda, is they're very, very easy to dismiss you. The reason it takes 2 years to make these kind of films is because we don't want to be labeled in any way, shape, or form. So if I'd only shown you one province, it would be made quicker, would cost less time and money. But then I knew that people would say, oh, they just took one temple and then they just showed it. So I made a point to go to all the corners of India. Imagine the nightmare. I don't even speak Tamil. I don't understand Tamil.
Yeah.
You have no idea the length and breadth I had to go to get those permissions. And then shooting in temples is unheard of. Like anybody who wants to go and seek permission to shoot inside a temple, be my guest. You will die trying. So the reason we go through all of this is so that no lazy intellectual, no armchair activist can just say that, hey, this is not the whole of India. India is so diverse and this is happening. So this, what you're saying, is primarily a sword hanging by our head, saying that, okay, unless you show the entirety of India, and still, I'm sure some people will see this in one of those screenings and say, yeah, but the interior, the rural part of India, this is the rural part of India. The temple in Hyderabad is actually outside the Hyderabad city. I had to write Hyderabad, right? The temples in the south are as rural as the north in Coimbatore. Then,
yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, and like and we'll come to that, the so-called controversial part in a bit. But one of the things that I really thought of this was so in the Jagannath Puri Mandir, for example, one of the responsibilities to sweep the floor. Okay, as it's jharu marna in Hindi, right? So they sweep the floor, and one of the things that I found very fascinating is actually the king who has to sweep the floor. And
no, he does not have to.
No, I don't have to, but he took on, he used to sweep the floor.
He
took on the responsibility, not have to, but he took on the responsibility of sweeping the floor to set an example, because in the whole thing from a bhakti perspective, right, as the Pujari says, that everyone is a servant of the Bhagavan, right? Bhagavan's dasasya dasaha, the idea is servant of the servant. So the king himself took that and said to set an example. So I thought that was a very fascinating thing, because and that tradition shows that, you know what, if I, the king, can do this, there is no, from a theological perspective or social, like sort of our perspective, there is really no need for any discrimination.
And
So,
Odiyas are very proud of that tradition. If you talk to
yes.
any Odia, they would say, I have an Odia teacher in one of the classes, and then he was saying that the king, no matter how busy or whatever is done in the evening, 5 a.m. in the morning, he would wake up and he would be the first person in the temple and sweep the floor and all of that. And this was a practice they did religiously every day. Hence, hence, so what you were saying about Hinduism or Sanatan being the casteist heaven that your colleagues from the US were trying to paint it as such. I think the truth of the pudding lies in the eating of it, right? So how do you expect more than 50% of Sanatanis to still be in the Sanatani fold when they're actively chased by Abrahamic faiths? If such was the discrimination. So in the religion itself, not trying to say that there's no caste discrimination in India, it is a social issue, very rightly used for political issues, but it is not as religious an issue in the 19th century, and now we are in 2025. So a lot of work by a lot of people have been done for hundreds of years. Ramdev is 16th century. Mirabai is, I think,
Yeah.
15th or 16th century. The
Yeah,
Bhakti
Ravidas, so
movement that
many different,
happened,
like, exactly. All of them,
right?
yes, absolutely.
So there has been a huge thing long before the conception of Dalits came into being. All the Bhakti movement priests were saying we are one.
Yeah,
So, but
absolutely.
that's for somebody.
No, go
So
ahead,
so
sorry.
if you So you see that the subject is so vast that I've only taken two narratives saying that not all priests are Brahmins, and that at least our Prachin Prasid, which is old and famous popular temples, are caste free. But then there are so many other things to say. That is where CoHNA comes into the picture, right? But we as filmmakers, Indic Dialogue, we can only do so much. We can only document you the most ridiculous idea that is taken as gospel truth in your circle. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot there, but you're saying that this is ridiculous, and I'll show you how. But then there are 10 others, so there could be 10 other films, because the other 10 things that you hear in US about Indian society and caste discrimination are, I don't know if there is a rubbish to the power, and I don't know if that's a maths reference somebody will get, but it's just absolutely rubbish.
Yeah,
The two
it's
is in the film.
it's selective narrative, right? So they only want to show what's convenient for them, right? And like you said, that doesn't mean there are no social issues, right? There have been issues with temple entry. There's like news. Obviously, people have been either killed or there's someone doing some ridiculous purification ritual. There's things like that you find. So to be perfectly candid and honest, like we like to be honest about this. And one of the things that I want to be very mindful of is that it's not that there is no caste discrimination, like you said, right? But what I always say in our webinars, in our workshops, is that Hinduism has a prescription of inclusivity to get rid of all these social discriminations. And that's why years after years after years, you have had saints, social reformers, spiritual leaders from every type of lineage that have said, this is not what Hindu Dharma is about. You have to go back to the basics, go back to the core, because society degenerates, society has these issues. And for example, in what do you call, in these sort of like, there's a king that in the southern part of India that actually issued
Yeah,
a
Kerala.
edict to get 1,700 temples. I believe the number was
Yeah.
1,700, to actually say, okay, everybody's allowed in here. Right now, imagine, this is where the power really lies. It was really in the hands of kings in many ways. Kings made a lot of rules and regulations that said, nope, this is how it's going to be. Nope, this is what needs to happen. 1,700 temples were then opened. So this social reform started to change the society. And to be honest, a combination of degeneration in society plus colonization really created a toxic environment in that sort of, I would say,
Yeah.
19th century and early 20th century, and created this sort of fixation and rigidization of the caste system as we know. And this is something that we really, really dig deep into when we do our workshops. So I encourage everybody to attend our workshops on caste where we talk about this. But coming back to the temple, I want to start to like conclude about this particular piece here. You also bring in some of the Dalit activists. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name who you interviewed, a very, very sort of important person who had participated with Baba Saheb Ambedkar and things like that in sort of like social reform. And there was a very famous case, right, of Baba Saheb going into a protest and doing some temple entry and all this stuff, right? Now, what's really interesting is that was, let's say, whatever he said, 1936, or I forget the exact date. But now, at that time, the Dharana Satyagraha happened 3 years, and the temple was closed. No one was allowed. Dalits were not allowed, and things like that. But what was really interesting after that was, as the activist says, that I was there, the grandson of the priest who denied the temple entry reversed that tradition and actually said that I apologize, or I'm sorry that this actually happened, and for my ancestors, because this is not how it's supposed to be. So he took, I think, the 15 activists who are alive or something from that background back then, including this gentleman you interviewed. He garlanded them, he gave them the prasad, and he welcomed them. And from that day onwards, there is no restriction in that temple. It's the Kalaram temple, if I'm not mistaken, in Maharashtra. So again, while there were social issues, so this the activist basically says, right, yes, there are social issues, but our society has continued to reform and has changed those traditions and found those and said, no, this is not acceptable. New generations, new ways of thinking, many things have changed. And the decolonization process, that's why we call it colonize. The decolonization process has started to go back to the roots and says, no, our culture has been inclusive, has been welcoming to all. And this documentary kind of shows some of that stuff that, at the end, the priest actually says, every time there have been some issues, there has been a Ramanuja. Every time there has been issue, there has been a Madhacharya. Every time there has been an issue, there's a Vallabhacharya, right? From the Vaishnava traditions. Now, if we revere these acharyas, the great acharyas, who have challenged these types of thinkings, so why are we then fixated? We need to follow these acharyas who are our spiritual reformers. We have to follow them and say, no, this is what our acharyas have said, and we will follow their advice, what they are saying in that sense. So I thought that conclusion was actually very, very powerful in this. But I do want to ask you, now I'm going to shift to a little bit more controversial, okay? Yes, all this is good, but there are activists who will tell you that, hey, you know what? No, there are temples in India who still have these issues. There are people who have, bad thinking. How do you respond to that?
No, and they may be right. So my first idea, any Indian, if you ask, because the country is so diverse, that like Mark Twain says, everything you say about India is correct, and the opposite of what you said is also correct, right? It pretty much describes India. So if somebody with a camera went and traveled across India trying to find a temple where some kind of an entry is not allowed, they would be able to find one or two. But I'll give you a scientific approach to the question, and then I'll give you the religious or social thing. So I'm an engineer by education, although filmmaker by choice. So what you do is you take the sample data. So if there are 500,000 temples in India, okay, if less than 1% of these temples have these priests who still need their grandchildren to be born to get out of this mindset, then that is a figure that should be taken in perspective. One, so that's a scientific approach. So a lot of the criticism that you hear by sociology graduates are not scientific because they never give you the sample size. So you can make a point saying, okay, can I find one temple in India where there is a priest who is using it as his personal fiefdom and nobody is saying anything to him? You could, or you may. But is that temple then the representative of all the temples across India? That is the scientific answer. The other part is, because the culture is so diverse, when non-Hindus hear mandir, they think that it is all of them are governed in a single mindset. But then there are Gram Devatas, there are Kul Devata temples. So the Kul Devata temples are personal temples of the family whose Kul Devata is being worshipped. And while nobody really stops you from visiting those temples, like in Rajasthan, all the kings had their own Kul Devatas and Kul Devi. So the famous Rat temple that people hear in Jodhpur is actually a Kul Devi temple. So, so that deity is personal deity to the kingdom's rulers. Now you could go there, sure, and they allow you, but they would be well within their rights to say, but this is our family deity. So in that sense, a lot of temples of Gram Devata temples, for example, if you go, it's not unusual for the people there to ask, okay, but you don't look like you belong to this village. They won't stop you, but they could. And if they do, and then you come out and shout, oh my God, I was stopped because I was a Dalit. I actually threatened somebody with this in one of the commercial buildings in India. Because we have so large population, there are elevators for the owners and people who are the owners of the offices. And I was a visitor. And the guard started discriminating, you can't take this elevator. And I was in a rush. And I said, you are stopping a Dalit. And this is why we fought for. And because it is illegal in India, he was like, oh my God. And then I went through. So I'm saying you could go to one of these temples and somebody would ask you and you could start fighting with them. And then you would be disbarred and then you can come out and say that this is also happening. So there are Kul Devi temples, there are Gotra Devata temples, so the Rishi temples, Gram Devata temples, those are not mainstream Sanatan Devatas. And so those people who are running those temples could make a valid religious argument. 99% of the times they don't. But if you go to any of our mainstream temples like Shiva temple, Devi temple, Vishnu temple, this won't happen. This will only so every time somebody reads that headline, I want you, Nikunj, to then read about that temple. Is it a Devata temple? Is it a Kul Devi temple? Is it a Gram Devata temple? Because most of those temples are governed very, very differently. So.
Yeah. No, good point. Now, let's see if we have a few questions. Let's see. So one question is, this idea of class and class. By the way, if you have a question, we're not going to take live comments, but if you have a question, put it in the Q&A and I will ask Nikhilji. So someone asked, did you mix up caste and class? And I think I think in the film, which people haven't seen, you actually talk about class. So the priestly class, as you say, not caste. So many times I think you have been fairly careful to do that. But, unfortunately, what happens is while we want to say caste versus class or class versus caste, which is class is more of appropriate term. The problem is a lot of times in narratives, but also in the official constitution of India, the word caste is being used. So it's very hard for people to say, okay, don't use caste in India because it's officially there. So we have to, I consider that as you have to use it with qualifications, right? There's a lot of disclaimers in the back saying what this actually means is class and this, that, etc. So your thoughts on that?
A lot of that is because there are quintessentially Sanatani terms, which when translated into English it becomes difficult. For the longest time, anybody who knew dharma knew that religion was a misrepresentation of the word dharma. And only now with Nikunj and his ideological grandfathers, like people who were doing this, have we been able to tell people that Dharma and His Holiness Dalai Lama probably is the biggest person who actually made it mainstream. So if we talk about Varna Jati, as a native speaker of Indian languages, we get the distinction. we get the shade. But when we do it in a different language, it becomes difficult. Like earlier, I was talking to Lance Armstrong, sorry, Jeffrey Armstrong, and I said Lord Rama, and he just lost it and he scolded me. Said you should be calling Bhagwan Ram or Sri Ram.
Yes.
And so even us, when we speak in English, we will say Mr. Modi, but you say Mr. Modi in India, and everybody looks at you like, dude,
No,
are
Modi
you
ji.
disrespecting Modi ji, right?
Yes.
So for people who will see the film, please spare a thought for people who are making a film in another language and trying to uh, present a very complicated idea in that minute without taking you away from the story.
And
So
go ahead.
me or you, we understand the distinction. But when I'm having a freewheeling conversation, I might slip a little bit. Uh, Like how I said, instead of Jeffrey, I said Lance because Lance is on the top of my head. So I'm saying, please spare a thought on these things. Right?
No, I think that's a very good point. I think, again, I go back to the idea of decolonization, because a lot of people in India, right, especially as they became part of the education system, they have been used to using words like Lord, for example,
Yeah.
or idol, right? Even people in India use the word idol. And they have to understand that the word idol is actually derogatory because
Statue,
it is by,
statue.
yes, statue, murti, we can use our own words. But the point is, when people use the word idol, right, to describe Bhagavan, they're actually using a word used by those who want to say that this is false, this is not the right religion, right? So we have to be careful. So just like that, so the decolonization process is going to take a little while. It's not going to be overnight,
Yeah.
to shed those shackles of colonization in our minds, in our, sort of like ways of life, many things, it's going to take a long time. So, but the process has started. One of the things that we try to do in CoHNA is avoid those words. So we will try to use those. And Kavindra Rishi, actually, Jeffrey Armstrong, his name is Kavindra Rishi. So Kavindra Rishi actually talks about this in his book. The Gita Comes Alive. He actually talks about the fact that there's all these words that are non-translatable that should be used in the way they are. Rajiv Malhotra has a whole book called Sanskrit Non-Translatables, where he says that certain words have no English equivalent. You may try to create an equivalent, but there's no English equivalent. So I'm really happy that you're acknowledging that, and it's really important. But at the same time, I want people don't miss the forest from the trees. Don't nitpick on things saying, oh, why did he use that word? Bhai, this is the problem with our community. We go into the weeds and say, don't use that word, don't use this word. Bhai, there is a narrative that's being built here. Yes, can we use that word? Can we use those words? We can. But the fact that you're actually saying that, oh, I'm not going to watch the movie or documentary because he used that word. Let's not have that. So I request everybody to kind of focus on that. Whether you use caste, class, yes, we have to do that. Not just that, but there's jati, varna, kula, gotra, kshetra, shreni. Like you cannot use one word to describe quote unquote caste. There's so many different words. And again, we advise people to attend these webinars or workshops that we're doing where we discuss this. So I really want to thank you for doing this work. It's a challenging thing. It's a complex topic that you've tried to boil down into of a diverse perspective. I'm really happy to see that. And we're looking forward to having you join us in the future. Looking forward to seeing the documentary, discussing that. I'm sure there's going to be discussions, challenges, critiques by our friends on the other side. They'll come up right now, but that's part of life, right? We have to be fighting those battles in the intellectual field and say, okay, challenge us. Because when we say dharma rakshati rakshitaha, when we are truly belief that our dharma and our culture, when preserved and protected, will protect us. That's why we have dharma rakshati rakshita. We can stand firm as intellectual kshatriyas to fight back and say, bring it on. Bring it on. We want to understand what you have, what you got, right? Bring it on, because we are steeped in our culture. We stand by it, and we will make sure that we can protect it by any means necessary. And these types of documentaries help fuel that forward and make sure that we have the right knowledge, the right equipment to challenge these false narratives and say, hey, it's not just black or white. It's not just the way you're showing it. there's a lot more complexity while acknowledging that there are problems in the society. So I want to thank you, Nikhilji, for joining us today. And I want to thank all the viewers for joining us. Some good questions. We obviously cannot answer all the questions, but let's keep the dialogue going. We will also publish this on our YouTube channel to promote this and create more awareness around it. So thank you and namaste to all.
And thank you to CoHNA for actually supporting it. I see a lot of questions asking for my contact. I'm not that special a person. I'm available on all social media. The double T will quite literally get you to me. You can ask me directly. It's all good. I'm your younger brother, son, however you want to see me. So thank you everybody for that.
And just on that point, the documentary is coming out as a premiere. If you want to talk about that real quick.
Yeah, so the premiere is happening in Beverly Hills on the 9th, and we have screenings scheduled across the United States, and I'll be in the US from August to September. So I'll try to make it to as many screenings as I can. And of course, anybody who wants to talk to me, buy me a cup of chai, or just teach me the difference between caste and class, I'm all up for it. And so hopefully it would be worth everybody's time. And really, I'm just a guest. Really, CoHNA, this is your fight, and I'm just a passerby. I've put something, well, like we say in puja, we say yatha shakti. Whatever I could do, whatever I was, whatever I could afford, I've put in the yagna. But you are the judgman of it, so take it forward.
We are all sevaks. Dasasya dasaha.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what we have the responsibility. So I want to thank you again for this wonderful exchange of dialogue and ideas. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in person as you come to the US, and we'll work on these discussions in various places. So for those who want to continue to understand where, find him, as he said, he's got a special last name with 2 T's. So you can look it up very quickly. You'll find him, but also watch out for the information, the webinar link that we're going to be sending out. Please send it to as many of your friends and family members, etc., who are always questioning these things and want to understand in an open and honest manner about this complex topic. So once again, thank you and namaste to all.